What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another video. I am the Hobbyist, and today we are going to continue on our Axial Scx10 build series, and today we're going to be building the transmission. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So starting off with what is in the bag, you're going to see all of these transmission components in black. I painted mine silver for scale realism, but yeah, you should have all of these plastic components. Moving those off to the side, you will also have some levers and other pieces like that. So make sure you've got all of those together. Moving on to the next bag. This is bag C, by the way. In here, there is the motor mount, some of the steel shafts, in fact, most of them. Yep, here's the motor mount. It's got predetermined holes for 11 through 18 tooth pinion gears. Very nice. So move those off to the side. In the next bag, these are all your screws, which are going to be used to screw the case together so that it does not fall apart. In here, there is also a wheel nut for the spur gear and also a couple E-clips. So keep in mind, you don't want to lose those. I'm struggling to get one out of the bag. But yeah, make sure that you've got all of your E-clips accounted for. The instruction manual will say how many needs to be in there. So moving right along. In here, this is the heaviest bag, bag C1. This has all of the gears for the transmission right in here. So you've got a bunch of small gears, you've got your locker gears, these are for dig. You've got a bunch of locker spools. This is your spur gear. It is a 40 tooth full steel spur gear. And a few other pieces. This guide is going to be tailored towards those who are putting both the dig and 2-speed transmission in. However, I will show you how to do the latter. And the last bag, we have all of our bearings and our slipper pads. So, all very important stuff. So now let's move on to the tools you're going to need to complete the build. Tools that you will need to complete the build is a 1.5 and 2 millimeter hex tool, a T-wrench, some needle nose pliers, and the thread locker and black grease that you used in the building of the axles. Optional parts will include a motor if you're going to install it at this stage. I'm going to. This is a Holmes Hobby Crawlmaster Sport 540 13 turn. You don't have to put the motor in right away, but it does make it easier later on. All right, let's get into the build. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is take one of these little clasps, one of these smaller steel rods, and one of the very tiny E-clips, if you can find them in your very tiny bag of screws. You're then going to take this shaft and slide this over here on the long side, paying special attention that the shorter side of this ridge right here is facing outward. So you're going to slide that on and then take your E-clip and very carefully clip that into position. If you can use your fingers, that's great. I'm going to use my needle nose pliers, just like that. All right. For the next step, you're going to take the two smallest gears that have this square output. This shaft right here, which should have come in your bag full of gears, you'll know this is the correct one because there will be a hole, a square, a ridge, a space, and then another ridge and square. So make sure you have the correct shaft right there. Then you're going to take one of the bigger E-clips, and you're also going to take one of the 5x11 by 4 millimeter bearings, and you're going to all slide that together. So starting off, take the smaller gear, slide it over the shaft like so. Take the large E-clip and clip it into place. This may be a little bit difficult, but thankfully, since it's a bigger E-clip, it's easier to get it all positioned in there correctly. Just like that. Next, you're going to take the larger gear, place it on like that, and then follow it with the bearing. For the next shaft of gears, you're going to take the longest shaft that came in your bag full of other metal shafts, and then you're going to take 2 more of the 5x11 by 4mm bearings, one of these locker looking things, this gear right here, which it is 40 teeth. So keep that in mind because these two look very similar, so make sure you get the correct one. You are also going to need this one. This is 35 teeth. It is a little bit smaller, so that is how you can tell. Then you're going to need 2 more of the 5x11 by 4mm bearings. You'll need 2 of these larger E-clips and 1 more of the 5x11 by 4mm bearings. Okay, so what you're going to do is take one of the bearings, slide it on like that, followed by the 35 tooth gear with this weird cross pattern facing towards the bearing, slide it over like that, and then put 1 more bearing in afterward. It should fit in the middle nicely. Then take one of the E-clips, if you can pick it up, slide it in, and clip it with your pliers. Or attempt to anyway. Next, you're going to take this black cross looking thing, slide it onto the square as shown. Oh wait. They are in fact different. One is smaller than the other. Take the larger one, slide it over like that. Then follow that with a bearing. To slide on like that. It should be a little bit loose. Don't worry, that's correct. Then slide on your other larger gear, the 40 tooth, and then slide your bearing on like so. And follow it off with an E-clip. Once you have the E-clip securely on, slide the final bearing on top of it, like so. Alright, now we're ready to start putting some things into the transmission case. Keep in mind you are going to need your black grease for this, because all the gears need to be thoroughly greased. So to start off, the parts you're going to need for this next step is this gear case piece and this gear case piece. You will know that they go together because they slide together like so. So, start with this piece, and with this bearing facing inward, clip it in. It'll just kind of slide into place like that, should spin very freely. On the other side, you're going to take this piece with the bearing facing in and slide it in the exact same way. Now, before you slide these in, however, you are going to want to grease everything. So, grease the gears, and then I'll put you back on. Once you have greased your gears, it gets a little bit tricky. You're going to take this lever. Now, if you are not opting to have your 2-speed transmission put in, or dig, either one, you're going to be taking this plastic spacer and sliding it over this shaft. But I want it, so I'm not going to do that. Then what you're going to do is slide it over. It might help if you pull this piece out a little bit. Slide it over this slider here, and then press it back into place, like so. Everything lined up. Fantastic. Next, you're going to slide everything together, making sure that this shaft goes through this little hole here. Just like that. Now you're going to take 4 of the M3 20mm long screws, take your 2mm hex tool, and screw in 4 points. 2 on top right here, and 2 on the bottom right here. So I'm going to screw that in and then show you the next step. Once you've got everything screwed together, I recommend you just turn these shafts to get a nice coating of grease on all the gears. If there's not enough grease on there, add a little bit more and everything should come out very nice. You might have to push this other shaft up a little bit. And it's all looking very nice. You should also make sure that this slides very evenly. It should just fine. And if it does, good. Now for those of you that have opted to put in the 2-speed transmission component, then you are going to take this little piece right here, this spacer, and one of the 2.5 millimeter button head screws. There is only one of them in here, so take that one. It is a 1.5 millimeter hex. Now first you're going to screw this component on and then take this piece right here and screw it in. Once you have the lever screwed in, then just take the cap with the little ridge facing downward, place the screw through it, and screw it in. It may be a little bit tricky at first because the lever is going to want to rotate, but once you get it started, it should be no problem. With this assembly completed, let's move on to the next step. You are still going to need this, but now you're going to need this large plastic piece of the case right here. So, to start off with this step, you're going to need this joint right here with the square, the ridge, and then the hole and thread. You're going to need another one of your 5 by 11 by 4 millimeter bearings. You're actually going to need 3 of them, so might as well get those out ahead of time. Then you're going to need 2 of these rather short pins. And then you're going to need these 2 gears right here. To start, you're going to position this upright like this. Take your needle nose pliers and place one of your 2 pins through the hole in the shaft. You're going to get that centered, and then you're going to place one of the gears on top and get it aligned as best you can. Just like that. Don't worry, they are the exact same tooth count, so don't worry about getting those mixed up. Then you're going to place a bearing on top like that. Then you're going to go to this side, place this component in just like that, and put a bearing through on the other side and slot it into the groove. You may need to use your hex tools to press the bearing in. There we go, just like that. Then you're going to take your second pin, and again with your needle nose pliers, place it through the small hole in the shaft. I recommend using the end of the needle nose pliers, otherwise it can get difficult when placing it in. Alright, now take your second gear and place it on top, making sure to get the pin aligned. And then you're going to place the bearing on top like so. Now grease up both of these gears, and then you're going to get ready to screw this part of the case together. Once the gears have been greased, then take 3 of the M3 by 14 millimeter screws, and you're going to screw it in to these holes right here. One right there, one right there, and one right in there. So, place it on top, being very careful not to spill the bearing, and kind of wiggle it around so that the bearing seats in. It may take a couple attempts, press it in like that, then take your 3 screws and screw it together. Once that's all together, I'd recommend turning this shaft, making sure that everything spins nice and freely, and then you're ready to move on to the next step. Now this one does get a little bit more complicated because this is where we're going to be implementing some of the dig parts. So to start off, you're going to need this plastic cover here, your largest ring bearing, 2 5x10 by 4mm bearings, 3 of your 5x11 by 4mm bearings, and pretty much it's just all of the remaining bearings, so just take them all out. Next, you will need this shaft here and this shaft here. You're going to need the 1 remaining micro pin, and you are going to need this gear, and this gear. Easy to tell, this gear has this cross pattern, this gear has the square hole, and this gear is different from the rest of them. Alright, let's start assembly. The first thing to do is place the assembly up like this. It will fall, so you're going to have to kind of hold it. Taking the needle nose pliers and inserting the last remaining pin into the hole in the shaft. This may take a couple attempts. You're going to have to turn the shaft a little bit to get it to line up. But once it's all lined up, it'll go in seamlessly. Right after that, you're going to place this gear right here on top, making sure to line it up with the pin, like so. Now you're going to take one of your 5x11 by 4mm bearings and placing it in like that. You are then going to place in this shaft and this shaft with the hole going outwards like that. You are then going to follow with your 2 smaller bearings, oops, being careful not to let them slide in like that. Slide one on top of the middle shaft, followed by the gear, followed by the second bearing, and then you're going to take this gear right here and place it on this shaft like so. Next, you're going to grease up all of these gears. If the gears are all nicely greased, take your 2 remaining 5x11 by 4mm bearings and place one on top of this shaft and one on top of this shaft. Then take your extremely small bearing, fit it in the middle like so, and take your large ring bearing and place it over this gear just like that. Slight mistake I just caught. If you're, first of all, remove this bearing does not go there. So leave that bearing out, then slide this bearing on, and it should go all the way down. There. Perfect. Now you're going to take the last remaining bearing and not use it yet. Set that aside. Now take the case and place it on top like that. And you're going to take 2 more M3 by 14mm screws and screw it in here and here. Once you've completed that portion, you're going to set that aside, and we're going to focus on this piece right here. Now for this, you're going to take your last remaining bearing, whatever you call this, a locker I suppose, this, which is the locker, this shaft here, this smaller shaft, this slider, the E-clip, and this spacer if you are choosing to run without dig, but I am choosing to run with dig. So we're going to leave that aside. To start, do the same thing you did with this other shaft. Slide this on, doesn't matter which direction. Put the E-clip on in the little ridge that is in the shaft. You know, those pliers are very helpful right here. Just like that. Then we're going to set that aside, and we are going to take this shaft right here, facing it in this direction, and we are going to put the locker on, followed by the other half of the locker, followed by the bearing. Now you're going to place this component in just like this, and you're going to slide the entire assembly in here, making sure that this goes through this hole, and then this shaft goes through this tiny hole right here, which it has. So now we are going to screw on the lever for this. To build the lever, you're going to need this cross piece, these two halves of the lever, and this bolt right here. It's a kingpin bolt. And then also this short screw right here. You're going to have to do the same thing here as you did with the other one, but do pay special attention and make sure that the side that has this kind of curved edge to it goes in this way. So just apply pressure and screw it on. Once you've screwed it in, only screwing it up to the side of the threads, of course, you are going to position it semi-horizontally like so. Going to take the lever and clamp it in around with this side facing outward from the case. So position it and connect it up like that. You are then going to take your non-kingpin bolt, and screw it in. Once you've got it bolted in, you're going to take the kingpin bolt, align it through the lever and then into this little hole right here, and screw that in as well. When it is all assembled, the lever should move freely like that, and that will operate your dig. Now you are going to take these two very short screws right here, and you're going to line them up with the device that is in here that has screws. Now for this you are going to need thread locker, and you're going to bolt them in. If you have done everything correctly, when this lever is out, it should not be able to rotate, but when the lever is in, it should be able to rotate, which on here it does. So that is how the dig function works. Now, if you want, you can grease this up. I recommend that you do, because that will make life a little bit easier when on your shifting servo. But if you don't want to, that's fine. Now we're going to move on to installing this to the rest of the transmission. To install this to the rest of the transmission, you simply place it in like that. You may have to rotate it a little bit. I didn't, but place it in like that. Then take your 3 longest screws and put them into these 3 holes right here. With that done, you should have most of your main transmission working. So if you put it into gear using this lever here, if it is inside, that is first gear, and you rotate this shaft right here, everything should spin. If you pull it out, that is second gear. It should spin a little bit faster. Then this lever, if it's in, then dig is not engaged and this will spin. If it is out, then dig is engaged and it will not spin. Just like that. So now it's time to move on to the spur gear and motor mounting. Mounting the spur gear is quite simple. You first take one of these metal pads, place it down, followed by one of the octagonal pads, followed by the spur gear, followed by one more of the octagonal pads, then followed by the other metal piece right here. Then you take the very large spacer, followed by the wheel nut, and this is where you will take the T-wrench and screw it on. With the spur gear secured and everything nice and tightened down, you are ready to mount the motor. Now, this part can be a little tricky for some. There is a slot here and here where these little nuts go. Now, be very careful because they are notorious for sliding out. Some people put CA glue in there to keep them from moving. I'm not going to, but we'll see what happens. So now that these nuts are in, you are simply going to line this component up, slide everything in like so, and screw it in. However, before you do that, you need to screw in one of these supports, this one right here. So you are going to place it in here like that, get it lined up, and screw it in right here, like so. Once this support in, now you're ready to place this on. Now, quick warning, screw in this screw point, and this screw point first, and then come back to the video where I will show you what to do with this screw point. Once you have screwed in these 3 screws, for the final screw here, you're going to screw in the other support just like that. And it's just like this one, so just screw it in straight through. Once you have screwed everything in and you have all of your mounts connected, it is time to do the motor. Now, if you're not going to be installing the motor already, then you can kind of skip over this step. But for those of you that are installing the motor, you're going to take your motor and place the special mount over it, lining it up with the 14 tooth screws if you're using the stock pinion, which I am going to. If you're not, if you're using say an 11 or a 17, just line up the holes accordingly. Take 2 of the flathead screws. I find it easier to put the screws in first. You don't use Loctite for these, and kind of push them through. That makes it easier for me to find the holes in the motor. So there's 1, and there's 2. So tighten those down very tight. You don't want those to slip. And then you're going to take the pinion gear, the large set screw, and for this you're going to need some Loctite. Screw on this like that. A little bit of Loctite. Screw it in and place it on the shaft. Now, I am now realizing that you can't put this on with the motor mount on it. So, you're going to have to remove the motor mount once more. It is kind of annoying that you are limited to doing that. Make sure you find the flat edge on the motor shaft, which is right there for me. Push it all the way down and screw it in nice and tight. Then go in afterward and find your motor mounting screws once again, and that will be all set. Once you have the motor mounted, you're going to align the motor mount accordingly. This notch helps you get an idea of how it needs to slide in. So just kind of wiggle it around until it slides in like that. You are not going to grease these gears, but do make sure. Geez, it looks like that could go in a little bit more. Okay, so if you guys can see in there, the gears aren't perfectly meshed, so I'm going to take this off and kind of align the motor. This pinion is very tricky, so kind of align it the best you can, and then I'll put you back on. Alright, so I found a better spot for the pinion gear and I got it all fastened up. So now you're going to take this cover right here, place it on top like that, and take the last two remaining flathead screws and screw it in. If you made it this far, congratulations. You have successfully built an Axial Scx10 transmission. Now, if you opted to have dig and 2-speed installed, like I did, then you're going to have these two plastic spacers left over. If you opted to eliminate those components, you will have these two pieces right here and one screw, as well as 3 plastic pieces here and 2 other screws left. If you've got anything else, spares, bearing, gear, whatever else, you missed something and now you gotta take the whole thing apart again. But hopefully you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment in the section below for what videos you'd like to see next. Make sure to hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of the other videos in this build series. And with that said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.